Nye daya chalwe danya ya jimbo la ne pare churu ji. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so I think I will go straight to the book and we'll continue from where we left. So just again to remind you, we have been basically talking about the part of the samsara in this book of Rangjung Dorjes. And samsara is nothing but a projection of mind. And when we say mind, then there are different, let's say, types of mind as we learned. Here in this book, we are discussing about 8 kinds of mind. So there are, generally 6 kinds of mind, different numbers of the mind. I don't think it really matters at all. But nonetheless, since they are mentioned, then we say, okay, 8 or 6, something like that. Here we are talking about 8. So what we need to understand is it just basically really means that, whatever we see through this mind, whether it is 6 or 8 or whatever number there may be, they only and only perceive, what is, they only and only perceive, the nature of the phenomena in a very mistaken way, completely mistaken way. So therefore, this means that, like whether it is my eye consciousness, whether it's my ear consciousness, the question is, am I really seeing it according to the nature of the phenomena? Then the answer is actually no. The actual state of the form that I'm perceiving, the actual state of the sound that I am hearing, I'm actually not seeing it at all. So therefore, now you can see it's all really mistaken concept, whether it is eye, ear, nose, tongue, consciousness-wise, and also mind-wise, whatever you may be thinking in terms of, whether it is good, whether it is bad, good, bad, ugly, emotion-wise, happy, sad, jealousy, pride, they are all misconceptions, is what we are actually trying to learn here. So this tells us that no matter what we experience with our this very conventional cognition, they are never right. Right what? They're never right as far as the real state of the phenomenon is concerned. They're never right about it at all. They always misinterpret it. They misinterpret it, and we always see something, experience something that actually is not the nature of that object whatsoever. So now you can see that how it is said here that when we talk about obscurations, these are actual obscurations. 8 consciousnesses, they are all obscuration because they all obscure us from seeing the reality, from seeing the truth, absolute truth. They really, we say absolute truth, but it actually means, the truth of the phenomena as they are. We never see them. So here, we'll come across, generally we talk about different types of obscuration, but we need to understand, we need to know that later on, or we'll talk about something like transformation. There is no transformation. Now you can see that as long as we engage through these consciousnesses, then we will never be able to really see the truth, are we? We're never able to see the truth. So that means, when we see the truth, when you really see the truth as it is, then these misconceptions, 8 kind of consciousnesses, they are completely overcome. Because without them overcoming, how I'm actually about, how am I supposed to really see the truth as it is? It's impossible, completely. So these things are important to know. I'm saying this because oftentimes people think like, oh, this mind, like consciousness or the eight consciousness, becomes some wisdom. There is no such thing at all. It's very much like if you have this, cataract, then you won't be able to see the object as it is, as long as you experience that cataract, right? So then when you remove this cataract, then you will have no problem in seeing the object. Exactly. So this consciousness, they are like that cataract, or any like mirage, for example. It's exactly same thing like this. So all dream mind, it's exactly same like that. Meaning, sometimes people feel like they're, especially in Vajrayana and Mahamudra, sometimes they say, that I'm going to transfer, or like anger, you need anger, you transfer. Anger can never become compassion, period. How can anger become compassion at all? It's silly to even say that. So then people like, no, you don't need to do anything with anger. You can just transform it like that. This is very, very mistaken idea, actually. If there is no anger in you, it simply means you remove the anger. It was without removing the anger, compassion can never come about at all. and many of those things we have. It's not like black becomes white. You think, oh, anger and all these are like black, and then somehow you do some meditation, and then this black turns into white. That's not at all possible. So it's very simple. We make it complicated with our thoughts. Like I said many times this time. So, so therefore, we now actually really understand that, without doing away with this very mundane mind, samsara and nirvana, these terms are very, just exotic things, really. It doesn't mean anything, samsara, nirvana, all these words. And like I have been saying since we started, it's about reality, it's about truth. You see the truth, that's it. You call it Dharmakaya, you call it whatever name you may give, it does not matter. You just see the truth as it is. So, and it is really important to see the truth, Yeah, so we have to keep those things in mind. Now I will actually read, through the book, because I want to stick to the root text, even though I realize that the commentary is by Jamgo Konto, like I said, okay? So I realized that actually the whole commentary is, Sutra Alankara. So like I said, it's actually from Sutra Alankara. It's pretty much like reading one chapter of the Sutra Alankara. It explains in Sutra Alankara. But it's really one chapter, and even in that chapter, it is a part of that chapter. It's not the whole chapter even. A part of that chapter talks about, the kaya, the wisdoms, and those things. But I don't think this Sutra Alankara, ornament for Alankara, ornament for Sutra is a huge book. It's very, very thick book, like this. So, and it's without a teacher, it's very difficult to understand. Really, very difficult to understand. So I don't advise you to buy it, actually. All right. So I'm going to read now. Continue. So here he's talking about the seventh consciousness, even though we went through this, but I'll read it again. The second is an aspect of this immediate mentality. It is called the afflicted mentality because it believes mind as self, possesses pride, has attachment to self, and has ignorance, and gives rise to all destructive views. All right. Mainly we are talking about ego, ego, the self-clinging or anything, right? All that. So, but here he says that this mind of klesha, has these characteristics, mainly four of them. It can be more, but he's counting four. For example, it has the characteristics of the ignorance. Naturally, it is the ignorance. Like I said, from the 12 links of dependent origination, it is the very first dependent origination of the ignorance. Ignorance that is rooted in ego, that's rooted in ignorance. So, and then because of that, then there is the attachment comes around. Because of attachment, then pride comes around. Because of the pride, the thought of superior comes around. I'm better than. This we actually know from our own experience. This notion of being superior. It's very much similar to the pride. So all these are, source of, let's say, kleshas or emotions, and this the seventh consciousness, when we call it seventh consciousness, is that mental afflicted emotion. In short, it's dangzin, interpreting with dangzin. Dangzin means self-clinging. If you know that, then I think we know it very well. We actually know it very well, even though we are not really able to, let's say, recognize that. We simply don't recognize it, but because we are born with that. When we are born, then we are born. This is actually, in Dharma term, there's called, the innate clinging. We are born with inborn clinging, we can call it, right? As soon as a baby is born, they don't need to be taught. There's this notion of I already present in their mind. So it's in the state of the mind. So anyway, I guess everybody really knows what the ego is all about. Yes, so this is this meaning, this notion. It's actually, a state of a state of state of misconception, we can say, state of wrong view. All the wrong views, the source of all of the wrong views is none other than this one, right? Because of that, that ego clinging. Like all the great scholars say that, the source of course we call samsara, but source of every single, let's say, thought and experience that we experience is always rooted in this notion of I, me, and mine. Chandrakirti has, says that in his book. First, the notion of self is born. And that notion of self induces the notion of others. And then that, induces the notion of phenomena. In this way, then all this, limited grasping is born from that. So therefore, therefore he says there is this, endless birth of sentient beings in the samsara. So this ego clinging is the root of this endless birth. So when we say endless birth, that means endless suffering. Birth is the source of suffering. 100% is synonymous with that. So that basically you can see that he's talking about truth of origination, truth of suffering. We must know that our body, our mind, the world is the truth of suffering. Okay? And then there is also the origin of that. So what's the origin of that? The two origin, the karma and the klesha. So here we're talking about the klesha. Like Chandrakirti says, the klesha is none other than our very own this, mistaken notion of I. Yes, he says, therefore, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas experience this, this unconditional, great loving kindness and compassion because they understand, why sentient beings are suffering. So he says, I pay homage to that great compassion. It's a very beautiful line in Tibetan. Anyway, so we, from time to time, it's important to know these things. So now the only way to, get out of that is to destroy, like it says here, destructive, all the wrong views. And this ego clinging is the source of all the destruction or destructive view, like it said, come up here, right? He's saying the same thing. It's very true. All the mistakes we make, whether it is from the Dharma point of view, whether from the mundane point of view, it's really, really because of this notion of the self. So now you can see that when we talk about liberation, so-called liberation, the liberation is, we are referring to the suffering, right? We don't want suffering. We're not exactly saying we don't want to live in a house. We just don't want the suffering. That's it. So to stop that suffering, you can't just stop the suffering because suffering is the result. So in order to stop the suffering, you need to know where that suffering is coming from, what is causing that suffering. So then when you really analyze that, oh, it's coming from karma. Where is karma coming from? Well, karma is coming from emotions. Emotions coming from that very much rooted ego self, the notion of self. And that's rooted in self. So until we destroy that truth of origination, until we destroy that, there is no liberation at all, liberation from suffering. So it will come up later on, but we call Dagme Togwe Shirap. It means the wisdom that help us to understand the selflessness. In short, it means pragyana, the wisdom, that. So we need this. Through learning, reflecting, analyzing the nature of self, nature of phenomena, we come to know that we lack the notion of self, that the notion of self do not exist at all. And it is only through that wisdom, we cut through that wisdom, or with that wisdom, we are able to see the absolute. So therefore, that's actually called transformation or getting rid of the ego clinging. So without that wisdom, and we of course will talk about wisdom coming on. So this is how it works, or liberation is achieved. All right. Okay. 19. The immediate mentality, which is instantaneous upon the cessation of the sixth consciousness, is the location for rising of those consciousnesses. The afflicted mentality is the location of the for the afflictions. Therefore, mentality has two aspects, due to their power to create and its power to obscure. Again, we talked about that, but here he's saying that yes, this seventh consciousness or eighth consciousness or something like that, no? And the one we talk about. Again, it's like I mentioned this many times, it's really very difficult to understand it. We call it, mental faculty. We call it mental faculty. Mental faculty is responsible for the continuity of the mind. I mentioned that, but I'm reminding you again, it's responsible for the continuity of the mind. What that meant is that, my mind, when this, let's say, the very first moment of the mind, is when it ceases, so to speak. In that very moment, it actually triggers its later, moment. And at the same time, it also has this function of, leaving the imprints of that previous moment into the mind. So it has this function, meaning this particular mind called mental faculty has the, the two kind of, let's say, activity of triggering the continuity, or it just, sort of keeps up the continuity. At the same time, then it also has this function of leaving the imprints of the continuity of the mental impressions into the mind, so to speak. But it's actually spontaneous, meaning it's instantaneous or simultaneous, all of that. This part is important for us because, like I said the other day, otherwise we cannot prove the continuity of the mind, so to speak. Semji we call it. It doesn't matter the continuity of the mind. So then, in this way, we can also prove the rebirth, like I was saying one of those days. How rebirth happens because of this. It's interesting because when we, let's say, reach first bodhisattva bhumi, then this continuity stops right there and then, correct? And this is why one no longer will experience the mundane thoughts. Until that time, it continues. As soon as I realize the realization of the emptiness is actually first bodhisattva bhumi, in that very moment, then this klesha, all this mind, let's say, during the meditation state, is absolutely interrupted. So how can that be interrupted? Then there will be no longer the continuity of that emotion at all. Correct? So therefore, in bodhisattva, there are no emotions. Because then in bodhisattva, they have interrupted this mental faculty. Since there are no mental faculty, then the question of the continuity of this, mental afflicted emotion doesn't arise, correct? It's actually quite easy if we thought from that point of view. Now, in us, it continues on. This goes to prove that we have not yet gained the wisdom, to that can help us to cut that continuity, actually, at all. So, yeah, so that is the point when we, let's say, go beyond. The first bodhisattva bhumi is when we go beyond, the emotions. Well, that's when we actually, experience the Dharmakaya for the very first time. But these things will come up later on a little bit. This one, I'll explain it. There's actually something very interesting point. Like in the Theravadan tradition, they believe that the continuity of the luminous nature of the mind, cease to exist when the arhats enter into the, cessation, the fully cessation. I don't know how interesting, but I'm just going to say it to plant some seed in your mind. This is why they say that, there is no, once when you become an arhat, then you remain as arhat. There is no, gradual path after that. So there is no becoming of, let's say, Pratyeka Buddha, or there is no becoming of Bodhisattva. In general, I'm just sharing some view. Maybe it's not so very important, but important because, I want to plant that seed in your mind. Three yanas, we generally speaking, there are this view believing that there are these three final destinations, meaning like if you follow the path of Sharvaka, and if you became Sharvaka Arhat, you will remain as a Sharvaka Arhat, that's it. simply because the continuity of the luminous nature of the mind comes to an end when you enter into that cessation. And therefore, now if you are someone who is following the Pratyeka Buddha path, then of course you will become Pratyeka Buddha Arhat. And then you will remain as a Pratyeka Buddha Arhat. That's it. That is your final destination. And then if you're a Bodhisattva, then you will become a Buddha. So here, some scholars, Mahayana do not believe in that, but some of in the Theravada tradition, they assert saying that there are these three very final destinations. And I'm saying this because it's actually linked. The reason why they are saying this is why? Because if the mind, the luminous nature of the mind did come to an end, then this is possible. Because then what will continue on? Correct? There's nothing to continue on. In Mahayana, then we say no, it does not. So therefore, according to Mahayana, there's only one final destination, we call that. That's actually Buddhahood. So as far as the Arhat and Pratyeka Buddha are concerned, they are like temporary cessation. They give this example of an island where you cross the ocean. Temporarily, they rest there, and then they, of course, later on follow the Mahayana path, and eventually, they all become Buddha. So this is why, according to Mahayana, Buddha is the ultimate refuge. But according to those who believe in these three different final destination, then you can see there are three ultimate refuge, according to their own path. Anyway, it's something I just wanted to plant seed in your mind, because I believe that we'll be born again and again, and we'll be studying Dharma. So it'll be very helpful, actually, in the future coming lifetimes, I'm guessing. So right now, you don't really need to worry about, if you didn't get what I'm saying, you don't need to worry about that. We're just planting seed. Always we're planting seed. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just planting seed, and that's what I need. Okay. But it's good to hear these things sometimes. It's actually more related with the refuge. Anyway, so we don't have time to go into that. All right, now the eighth consciousness, he explains here the eighth consciousness, the ground consciousness. To those with superior understanding, the Buddha taught the ground consciousness. It was also named foundation consciousness, the location consciousness, and the according consciousness. All the actions created by the other seven consciousnesses are accumulated distinctly and impartially within it, meaning it's stored in there. Like rain and river flows into the ocean, therefore it is also named ripening consciousness. Yeah, it has many names. So what he's saying here, Kamaparang Jundorje, again, please understand that it's not only Kamaparang Jundorje who is teaching this. Because oftentimes people think, it is only one particular scholar is teaching that. It's not. Like I said, these teachings are found in many different books. Okay, it's not in one book. So now coming back to this, like for example, I was saying there is this book called 30 Verses. The book on 30 Verses is most well-known book on these 8 consciousnesses by Vasubandhu, because Sumchupa. It's a really, really good book, actually. You can buy it on Amazon, I'm guessing, So if you get time and if you're interested, it's called 30 Verses Sumchupa in Tibetan, but you must say by Vasubandhu, okay? Otherwise, there are many 30 verses, different types of 30 verses, so do not want to buy that. There was another one which I now don't recall. I actually have that book, in States. It's a very beautiful book, but I don't remember the name in English because, it's not like how we have it in Tibetan. Anyway, now coming back to what we are saying, so the ground consciousness, like I mentioned earlier that, on its own, it doesn't do anything, as you can see. It's like space. Space isn't really doing anything, is it? It isn't doing anything. So it only plays as a ground for living of impressions, I'm guessing, right? Meaning, like, generally, if somebody would ask, okay, when we are saying this, then we think, oh, that means there's consciousness, or ground consciousness is negative. It's not negative. Again, I have to go a little bit into the, into the philosophy terms. On its own, it's actually neutral. On its own, it's also not an obscuration. Like space on its own is not an obscuration, correct? It's not an obscuration. On its own, it's neither positive nor negative. On its own, it's, neutral, actually. Let's put it this way. Just that part is okay. So that is why it's impartial. Can you see that? If this would be a mind of positive, it won't be ground mind. Will it be a ground mind? It won't be. Why? Because, it's positive. How can positive be the ground mind of negative? It's impossible. So it has to be something that's neutral. So this is why the consciousness itself is actually neutral. The ground consciousness. Like come up a saying here, what he meant here in terms of superior understanding actually is in Sutra Alankara. Again, actually it's a quote from Sutra Alankara. In the Sutra Alankara, Mitra says that this ground consciousness is very subtle, very deep, very profound. Therefore, arhats, and Pratyeka Buddhas do not have the ability to understand it. So therefore, Buddha did not give them the teaching regarding the eighth consciousness and the seventh consciousness at all. Because they may mistake it for some other things, is how it is said. So now and also this ground consciousness, it's a very good example actually here he gave, like he's saying that ground consciousness itself is like the ocean, correct? And then the seven consciousnesses, like for example, the six consciousnesses are like, rain, I'm guessing. And then seventh consciousness are like the river, they just flow. So we need we need rain to create river. And then river creates, different types of river creates ocean. It comes down to ocean. Likewise, all these seven consciousnesses, they, create all this notion of good, bad, ugly impressions in our head, in our mind, and all this. And then, they create this, let's say, ocean, so to speak, of all this ignorance and everything. So that's why he's saying that ground consciousness is like ocean itself, which is just simply, the accumulation of the rain, the river, and then all kinds of water flowing from all kinds of places, so to speak. On its own, it's actually really, it doesn't really exist, so to speak. That's why. Like I was saying the other day, that Kamapa also mentions that this Kunji Namshe, we call it, the ground consciousness is sung with. Actually, Shantideva says in Bodhicharya Avatara, may one understand the most, secret function of the consciousness. I don't exactly remember which chapter, but he says that somewhere down there. Yes, and he is actually referring to that alaya consciousness. The alaya consciousness functions in a very mystic way, so to speak. like for example, how it sort of, creates or from the Alaya consciousness, all the karmas and emotions kind of rise. And then at the same time, where do they go? They go back into the Alaya. So like ocean, the waves comes from the oceans. And then the waves do not go out of the ocean, do they? No. Where do the waves go? They actually go into the ocean. So ocean and wave, you can't really separate it, even though we say this is a wave, but then it is the ocean, and all these different currents that you get there is also the ocean. So therefore, it's very mystic from that point of view. One needs this most, let's say, highest wisdom to understand that. The highest wisdom to understand the function of this very mystic way of function of the Alaya consciousness. Yes, so therefore, the only way to understand that, or the only path that can absolutely, without remaining, can help us to remove that, eradicate that, is the Mahayana path. Only in the Mahayana path. It cannot be done through the Hinayana path. It'll come up later on, but I'm bringing it up right now. What that meant is, like the arhats of both Charvaka and Parityaka Buddha, they are, of course, they have the realization of the emptiness. They have seen the Dharmakaya without any doubt, very, very deeply, of course. So therefore, they have removed, like I said earlier, absolutely removed the seventh consciousness, let's put it this way. Right? But what have they not been able to yet really remove or understand that there is an obscuration is the remaining subtle portion of the Alaya consciousness. We could say they have removed a portion of Alaya consciousness. Why? Because seventh consciousness, if they did remove seventh consciousness, then that means a portion of Alaya is also removed. Because it's connected with that Alaya consciousness. This, don't think it's a philosophical thing. This actually is very important in this regard. They have, but we don't say it like this, but there is nothing, it's not wrong to say that. So also when you read in the Abhidharma teachings and many like Pragyana Paramita teachings, it's actually mentioned in there. So therefore the bodhisattvas, and the arhat, they still have something to work with. So what do you think? Since they don't have ego, seventh consciousness is not there anymore, all these other are not there. So what is left exactly? The Alaya consciousness. The very subtle Alaya consciousness is synonymous with the, what we call as ignorance. Ignorance, actually. The most subtle ignorance. So the Vajra-like samadhi, we call it. Later on it will come up, but again, I have to explain you this Vajra-like samadhi. Every path has a Vajra. It basically meaning the most powerful samadhi, the most powerful meditation, absorption, wisdom. In the end, it actually refers to that. Every path has that, like path of, seeing has its own Vajra-like samadhi. Path of meditation has its own Vajra-like samadhi. This is something I will mention later on. It's just a metaphor. So, yes, this is how it works, the so-called transformation also. All right, let me check. Oh, yes, there's also like here, it's interesting to know that. The whole manifestation of samsara, correct, is a result, okay? Like what we see, what we experience, my whole existence, is a result. So this is called resultant, a resultant consciousness. So this resultant consciousness is actually resultant, we can say, Alaya consciousness. Because I'm going through that, I'm experiencing that, So therefore we can't change it. Why? Because it's already manifested. So how can, for example, I can't change my existence. I cannot become another person in this life at all. It's already, a grown-up tree, so to speak. Yes. It's already ripened, so therefore it is not a possibility. But then at the same time, in this very moment when I'm alive and when we are still here, whatever we may be doing, from the time when you are conceived until we die, from the Dharma point of view, from the mundane point of view, where do you think they go? Where do they go? We just say, oh, they are stored in the alaya consciousness. It's for us to understand, But we can really believe in that because in our own lifetimes, the memories that we have from the past, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or something like that, where do you think that come from? Let's say you did something yesterday. Why do you remember it today, actually? You should not remember it today, right, actually. So how come you remember it today? If there would be no memory, if there would be no storing of the mental imprint, if it is gone, do you think you remember anything? How do you remember that? What does that tell us? That tells us that memory, whatever you heard, you saw, is there, correct? The past memory is being experienced in the present with the help of the present moment. And it will not be possible if there were no imprints of that. It's very simple. We don't have to go into the past life. Past life meaning something that happened in the past, in the very, very immediate past. What's the difference between immediate past and so very past? Past is actually past. It's not like the past, like long past is different from immediate past. Past are what? Non-existence, correct? Do past exist? Okay, this actually is a very good question, but there's a debate on that. Not going to go into that. I guess there is a debate on that. Normally, past, the very definition of the past is non-existence. Future is not. Only thing that exists is the present, correct? Anyhow, I'm just saying that, So likewise, some memories are there that we see and experience in this life. But then there are all these other secretly hidden memories, we can say mental imprints, that we will experience in the coming lifetimes. So that those are seed in our mind. Sometime later we become Buddha, we become Bodhisattva, all that. All of this. All of that's going to happen in the past, so to speak. The seed must be there right now. So it's called seedling, we can call it conscious, or seed conscious, something like that. If you know the 12 links of dependent origination, it's very similar with that consciousness also. When we talk about consciousness, we split them into two. Here also we're splitting them. It's a good idea to do that, actually. Not good idea, there is a depth in that. I do my morning practice, we all do our morning practice. My morning practice is very much based on my morning practices, correct? I'm pretty much repeating what I have been doing my entire life. So I'm living the memory. Like Shantideva says in his book, his first chapter. I remember that very well, even as a very young boy. Somehow it kind of stuck with me. There's this line he says, the only thing that there is your memory, that's it. There's nothing else. And somehow it stuck with me so strong. There's a very beautiful line in Tibetan also. It says, there's nothing like past, present, future. Anything, the only thing is the memory. And it's so very true, and that's what we need. And from Dharma point of view, that's what we need. From mundane point of view, perhaps I don't need that, actually. I really will be very happy I didn't have that memory, because I don't want those memories. Why would I want that, I don't want. But from Dharma point of view, from like practice point of view, I would very much like the best experience that I had some time before. I would very much like to have that. So therefore, anyways, it's what we meant by, like this storing the seed and all these things that he's talking about into the alaya consciousness. All we need to know is that, you know, it's all in the mind, really. Whether you call it alaya, no alaya, does not really matter actually at all. What matters is that we need to actually really understand that. We need to recognize that, not number wise. Number one is this, number two is this, number three is this, not. But the function actually is there, right? You can see the functions are there. Our emotions are induced by those functions of the mind. So the functions are there, like, pleasant, unpleasant, emotions, everything. This is the function of the mind. When you look at your own function of the mind, we will know it. You can describe it in your own ways. You can name it in your own ways. This great master, they named it like it, ground consciousness, emotion consciousness, mental consciousness, they named it based on their function, correct? Based on their function. So there is a function actually. Like eye consciousness has its own very exclusive function to see. Ear consciousness has its very uncommon exclusive function of hearing. So the mental consciousness has the function of, conceptualizing things, judging things. And then the so-called ninth consciousness function is to trigger emotions. Eighth consciousness, so-called its function is to, keep them together, I'm guessing, so to speak. But there is no some mind up there keeping together, so to speak. It's just a way of saying keep together. You think it's just there. Whatever you think is there in the mind. We never lose it. Good, bad, or ugly, anything, we never lose it. That's actually this is why karma is inevitable, correct? You will experience that. Karma is that mental impressions. It's all linked. Please know that this so-called karma, it's all same. Karma is not a physical thing. It's good way of understanding, or it'll help you more when you think karma as really like, the mental impressions, everything you experience, so to say. And then there must be alaya, correct? There must be alaya. Otherwise, how do you, in Chandrakirti's book, Madhyamika Avatara, there's very, very good teaching on that actually, about karma. He talks about, how a karma that you have done like billions of years ago, something that does not even exist. How can that actually someday kind of affect you? What's the difference between that karma that doesn't exist and the karma that I have already experienced, which also doesn't exist? The karma I've experienced which doesn't exist will never produce karma again. But this karma that doesn't exist, which I've not yet really experienced, so he talks about that. So then it comes all into this, consciousness, of the ground consciousness. It's just actually mechanism of cause and effect. Really, you cannot pinpoint. It's not like there is solid stuff over here, and then kind of there is this very thin line, that you can see going like this. Doesn't exist at all. It's very mystical. I sometimes think it's a little bit like, Albert Einstein theory of relativity, I think, no? Theory of relativity. I actually don't know, but it kind of was interesting for me to think like that. I maybe really don't know what that meant, but in my understanding, in my thinking, I'm thinking, oh, this is like, dependent origination. Really, it's about mechanism of causes and conditions coming to. There's a mechanism of that, yes. But that mechanism is what, actually? Energy, perhaps? That's it. They're not a solid thing. They're not a substantial thing. It's just mechanism of something there. Likewise, this cause, condition, karma, all this imprinting is like this. Theory of relativity is like, Tyndall. That Tyndall, not the 12 dependent link origination, but the dependency of that. it's very similar to those things. I guess you can really, based on that, you can realize the emptiness of phenomena, I'm guessing. Let's say you, instead of becoming a scientist, you use the theory of relativity to analyze emptiness of phenomena, for example. It's just a silly thing I'm saying. But you never know. It's just a switch. You switch from renunciation to bodhicitta, then you become bodhisattva. Correct? It's a switch. In the morning you take refuge, you only have renunciation. You are, let's say, Hinayana, for the sake of saying it. You switch to bodhicitta, right then you become Hinayana. It's just a switch. So you never know. Anyways, there is a truth to those, of course, all this, but I understand it's more physical point of view. Anyways, perhaps I don't know what I'm saying, but this. So all of this, like consciousnesses and how they function and how they're linked, their relationship is what I'm trying to say. The whole samsara thing, how they come into existence, how they go out of existence, and how they continue at all. How the past, present, future are connected is what I'm trying to say. The only explanation is there's a mechanism of that. Perhaps don't know what I'm saying, but it's a mechanism, is the word I like to use. But that mechanism does not really prove very much. But that's all we got. And that's all we need. As long as it functions, why does it matter actually? No? As long as it functions, it actually doesn't matter at all. But there is that. So this is why it's said that when we really analyze dependent arising, okay, you really very profoundly understand the meaning of emptiness. Like I was saying the other day, all the great scholars from Nagarjuna, well, Nagarjuna is the one who said that, but then rest of this, everybody says that. All right, so right. And now we're kind of done with the part of the mind stuff. Now, so that means samsara, part of samsara is more or less done. Now the, part of the wisdom and alaya, just in short, it's actually very interesting, and I'm very sure many of you know that. Here, there are some very common, mutual, common, let's say, view. That common view is that we talk about 4 wisdoms is very common actually, 4 wisdoms and 3 Buddhakayas. 4 Buddhakayas are very, very common. And then like from the word is transformation, which means like, what happens when, for example, alaya consciousness is eradicated absolutely, okay, absolutely from the root, then that is gone, right? It's already gone from this state of your mind. What you see is the Dharmakaya, we call it, correct? So therefore we say the term is alaya consciousness transform. It's very wrong to say transform. Please do not think alaya consciousness becomes Dharmakaya. Then whole of our point is, effort is pointless. It does not. In the very end, when at the right before one is to enter into the complete Buddhahood, we call it, right? The Vajra-like Samadhi, like I was saying, it means the very end, is what really eradicates the existence of the alaya consciousness. Absolutely. Ignorance, actually. And sometimes we talk about, obscuration. So this would be the obscuration of mental impression. The most subtle obscuration of the mental impression of, impression is called alaya consciousness is disregard, and it's removed. So then it's named as, the Dharmakaya or Buddhahood. In short, the omniscient wisdom is actually experienced. Even if there is the most tiniest, slightest obscuration, it's still an obscuration. It still obscures one from seeing the truth in absolute manner, correct? So we need to remove that too, so to speak. So anyway, Dharmakaya. These are interesting to know, it's actually basically meaning the one that what happens when you become Buddha? Its answer is, that's when you have absolutely removed all of the obscurations from the root. That's when you become Buddha. This is what he's saying. And then, for example, seventh consciousness. It's actually very nice. The seventh consciousness is the afflicted emotion. Okay, the afflicting emotion. So this afflicted emotion, when one, absolutely from the root removes it, this is when one really becomes free from this notion of dualistic mind, dualism, like this notion of samsara, nirvana, I, you, all this dualistic clinging, absolutely. From the Mahayana point of view, what is the point where one gains that realization? Actually, that's eighth bodhisattva bhumi. Meaning, on the seventh bodhisattva bhumi, in the very end, this Vajra-like samadhi absolutely removes the notion of self altogether. And this is when they gain experience. We call it the wisdom of sameness, right? From the wisdom point of view, it's called wisdom of the sameness. This is actually very interesting. It's basically meaning you no longer differentiate the sentient beings. You no longer experience any notion of the dualistic at all. There's no dualist clinging. It does not become two things become same at all. As of now, we are biased. We are always biased. Why are we biased? Because of this notion of ego or self. So we cannot help being biased. It's nothing personal, so to speak. So now when we realize the lack of the self, the lack of the existence, inherent existence of the true self, is called emptiness. In that very moment, in that very second, one absolutely go beyond this notion of, discrimination at all. So, like samsara, nirvana, this, that. There is no dualistic clinging at all. They still have dualism, but no clinging at all. They still see us, see themselves, but now the difference is that there is no discriminating mind at all. So now you can see it also means they don't experience the sixth consciousness as well. Correct? Sixth consciousness, one that discriminates also. We'll come back to that. This is when we experience, in my understanding, the true relative bodhicitta. Absolute bodhicitta is experienced in the first bodhisattva bhumi itself. When you realize emptiness, that's called absolute. Absolute bodhicitta meaning the realization of the emptiness. And this is there in the bodhisattvas, in the Charvaka and Pratyeka Buddha, because they all realize emptiness. So what are they lacking? Relative bodhicitta. You remember when we talk about 7 points of mind training, and then this Tonglen thing that we do is actually, a way of experiencing the sameness. Like in the 7 points of mind training, he says that, until the time you stop, discriminating, you'll not be able to experience the relative bodhicitta. For example, what that meant is, I'll bring it up because it's good for us to know. As of now, my mind only and only thinks of, one's own well-being. The well-being of other sentient being is secondary. Maybe it's not even secondary. If it's secondary, I think it's still very good. Maybe it's not secondary or third or whatever is there. In Tibetan, the word is, cherishing, self-cherishing. The attitude of the self-cherishing in us is so very strong because of the ego clinging. We cannot help but cherish. Like one becomes priority all the time. You always prioritize yourself. It's just automatic in us. So we are always being biased. So in the 7 points of mind training, it's long to tell, but there, it teaches us how to move from this attitude of, only and only thinking of one's own well-being to the well-being of the others. So here, then we reverse it. In meditation, you reverse it, right? In meditation, you ignore yourself. Absolutely, you ignore yourself. In reality, this is what we do to others. In reality, we ignore the well-being of the others. Absolutely. Only me. Selfish is at its peak, right? That's it. So this is, now imagine where is the compassion. It's very true. Compassion cannot exist in that mind. No question of arising compassion at all. So in meditation, we try to reverse that. I don't know if you're able to do that, but that's what we're trying to imagine. So here, like Shantideva says, in that. Now, I only and only think of the well-being of other sentient beings. Even for one moment, I do not think the well-being of myself at all. Why? Because now I understood that this notion of self-cherishing is the source of all the pain, all the suffering that I went through. I don't want it. I understand that all the well-beings, good things, came from only with this thought of, well-being of others. So therefore, so far I made mistake, like absolute mistake. It's actually what I'm saying, that in our imagination, Tonglen Prak. So when we do that, first I try to analyze, understand the fault, the harm of this attitude of self-cherishing. This we really need to do. Really, really need to do. Because we are very, very selfish. This is like the top of the negative things, okay? Don't think it's a good thing. It's not at all a good thing. So anyway, you see, so here he says that, first I sit down and try to think, what this attitude of self-cherishing, thinking of one's and only one's own well-being, how it brought about all this pain and everything to me. In Shantideva book, all the chapter 8 is beautiful, beautiful teaching. Really, really. And then you think about, the thing that I've ignored, right, completely, which was thinking the well-being of others, so to speak. The benefit of thinking of the well-being of others. So this is how reversed here. When it says here the same wisdom of sameness, it's not very easy. You can see that you really need the realization of actual emptiness, selflessness. But again, I must say that when we do this meditation, so now, I want to say this whole thing. So first we sit down and then we try to meditate on the shortcomings of the self-cherishing. let's say you got it. Okay? And then we want to think the well-being of, the benefit of thinking of the well-being of others. So then you are enthusiastic, you become inspired, and then you do that change. So now in a very, let's say, conclusion, so to speak, what happens, this is then when how do you practice that? Then we practice that with a Tonglen. And then we sit down, and then the Tonglen part comes. Only after that, actually. First, we train our mind. You train your mind with these two things. Simply put, these two things. Meditating on the harmful nature of self-cherishing, meditating on the benefit of cherishing others. You do that again and again and again. And then, when there is that realization, when there is some kind of inner warmth in oneself, and this is when you sit down and do the meditation. Like in like in mind training, you remember there's this it's a beautiful line. Well, the line where actually says that Chekawa, the reason Chekawa Yeshe Dorje came, about all these endpoints of mind training collected is because he saw this one simple note written by one of the Geshe, La Lungpa or something. He saw this, it blew his mind. He was always looking for something and he didn't know what he was looking for. And then he saw this one small note. And actually, the note is very simple. In Tibetan, in English, it is like, I give all of my, let's say, in Tibetan, it means I give all of my victory, success to others. And I take upon all the loss, failure upon myself. And that this word is, and then when he read that, it struck him like a thunderbolt. It's what he says, Chekawa Yeshe Dorje. And he wanted to meet this teacher. He met him, but he did not give him that teaching. So he was there, but he didn't want to listen to the other teaching. He wanted to know those things. Anyway, so it's not easy, actually. This so-called, it sounds very nice. Oh, selfless, this and that, sameness, but it's not easy. It literally, relative bodhicitta, bodhicangchuchi sem, is like that. There is no concept in them thinking, oh, I will take the pain, I'll give. It doesn't exist. It's just automatic. Bodhisattvas cannot stand the suffering of sentient beings at all. Simply put, that's it. This is the nature of compassion, correct? They cannot stand it. Therefore, they must, no matter what, how long, never give up. Because they really cannot stand the suffering of the sentient beings. It's too overwhelming for them, so to speak. In Tibetan, we call it mizepa meaning they can't take it, the suffering of the sentient beings. So therefore, they never stop working for the sentient being. Why do you think that? If you don't have this bodhicitta, the relative bodhicitta, Kunzop Chanchusen we call it, okay? But I must say that this relative bodhicitta is really, really supported by the absolute bodhicitta. Can you see it? Yes. Because you know the reason. So it's not just relative bodhicitta, but this relative bodhicitta is absolutely supported and induced by the ultimate bodhicitta. So without the ultimate bodhicitta, to experience this relative bodhicitta is slightly difficult, actually. But for us, we really should do that practice based on these things, okay? It's about time that we did something, actually, really. Always saying something, speaking something, how long you're going to do that. It's also about time that we also sort of try, at least we should try. Why not? You know, we can't always be lazy. I mean, it's in that sense, really, our life is just slipping away. It's very true. Slipping away in every moment, every second. How you're going to control every moment. You're slipping away. You may think you are very young. Yes, maybe you are. But that's just now. It's just slipping away. Your youth is slipping away. I'm not saying something very sad. Sometimes, people may think, oh, this Buddhist people, they say sad things. It's not a sad thing. It's a reality. You need to face the reality. You don't hide it. Like in the West, you hide everything, all these bad things you hide, and the good things you show it up front. So you try to think that it doesn't exist. It doesn't help. It exists. Homeless people exist all around you. Suffering exists all around you. Just because you keep them at the back doesn't mean they doesn't exist. They don't affect you. They affect you. You need to do something about the reality. So therefore, I'm thinking maybe it's not as bad as you think it is when you come to know the reality. But when you see, then, but once when you get to know that, it's manageable. Really, really manageable. So therefore this, the sameness wisdom, when then as far as the sixth mental consciousness, sixth, seventh, and the sense consciousnesses, all of them, they actually, let's say, transformation happens simultaneously, and they are transformed on, almost together, so to speak. Especially the, sixth mental consciousness and the sense consciousness are actually transformed even on the first bodhisattva bhumi. But then the name is discriminating wisdom. Right now, the one that conceptualize things, one that, grasp. This is this is that, this not this is the function of the mental consciousness, So when it's transformed, so to speak, that means when it's absolutely removed, we experience something, it's replaced by the wisdom of, let's say, discriminating wisdom is what it meant. As of now, our senses, this is how we function, right, through our senses. And then when we become a Buddha and Bodhisattvas, there's a wisdom called wisdom of activity. Through the body, through the speech, through the wisdom. It's called wisdom of activity, right? Activity, so things like that. And then, like for example, Dharmakaya is easy in this sense, like Dharmakaya really is a state beyond any existence. It's a state beyond, grasping. It's good to think Dharmakaya as a state of, the state of the absolute wisdom to help you, actually, absolute wisdom. Absolute wisdom meaning of wisdom without any stain to it, of any kind, so to speak, the Dharmakaya, so to say. Then the Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya are actually called this. This Sambhogakaya, it'll come, but I'll explain now, and then later on I can just read it. Longche Zopa. It actually means, enjoyment body. What it meant is that here bodhisattvas, only bodhisattvas, are capable of enjoy the teachings on the Mahayana. Okay, Mahayana. Who can receive Mahayana teaching? Only bodhisattvas can receive Mahayana teaching. Who teaches Mahayana teaching? And only Mahayana teaching. This particular Buddha or emanation of Buddha who only teaches Mahayana is actually called Sambhogakaya. It's not Sambhogakaya. It means the Buddha who teaches the wealth of the Mahayana teaching enjoyed by the bodhisattvas. So therefore we talk about pure realm in this regard, pure realm. In the book it talks about, these bodhisattvas, they experience Buddha in a very, very pure view, in a very pure form. you know. Uh, so no ordinary beings, no Hinayana or nobody actually can really see or experience that. So that's why it's more about Dharmakaya is manifesting the teachings, and these teachings are received by those bodhisattvas and bodhisattvas only. And then the experience of the bodhisattva, their knowledge, their wisdom, from the first bhumi all the way to the 10th, all of their achievement with regard to their realization, all of their view, the pure view, the experience, that experience is actually named as longchu, meaning the wealth, meaning the enjoyment. And that enjoyment is due to the Mahayana Dharma, because they received the Mahayana Dharma. It's a way of understanding that. This is why in Heart Sutra, you know, Shariputra was blessed. First, Buddha enters into the samadhi, okay, of the profound illuminating wisdom, we call it. And when Buddha enters that, this is when Buddha actually blesses the mind of the Shariputra to ask the question. Without that, Shariputra being Hinayana would not be able to ask question based on Mahayana. So actually the explanation is there in the Heart Sutra. I'm just saying, you know, maybe you're reading Heart Sutra somewhere. And then the other reason I understood is that there was another reason for that. The other reason is to, you know, encourage his, you know, his friends actually, meaning those who are on the path of same as on the Shariputra, to encourage them. If Shariputra can understand this Mahayana teaching, we too can understand that because we belong to the same path. So in this way, they're courage. Anyway, this is slightly out of this thing, but it's good. Like I said, it's all good because some of you may be reading it, some you may have the intention to read it, to study it. You should study it, you should read it actually. I'm talking about Heart Sutra, okay? It's very, very profound, very powerful. Okay, again, when I say these things, sometimes I should not say it because I'm saying this from my own point of view, you know. But then when you read it in your language, you may find it very weird, you know. Like, what is this exactly? You may not like it at all. In the first glance, you may not like it. So therefore, when I say these things, I'm saying it from my own point of view. I'm so used to it. I don't know if I know those meanings, but I just got used to them. And feels like I know something, feels like I'm feeling something. I have no idea if I'm feeling or I'm knowing something, but that's how I feel it. So then I say, oh, it's good and thing, and this just from my own illusion point of view, okay? It's just my own illusion thing that I'm actually saying. Everybody says that, so I'm just saying it, you know, so. All right. So no, then then as far as the Nirmanakaya is concerned, again, you know, Nirmanakaya, it was important for the, you know, because there are these different, you know, disciples with different capacity. So Buddhas would always appear to them according to their own, you know, disposition, actually, is how I understood that. So we cannot exactly limit the emanation of the Buddha into like 2 or 3, right? From the Jataka tales, we know that. You know, so it's not limited. But nonetheless, when we say Nirmanakaya Tulbiko, that actually means, you know, if it is needed, then Buddha would sort of appear in the form of different beings. We can say in the form of, you know, birds, in the form of monkeys, in the form of, elephants. There are many, in Jatakatil, there are many. Of course, human, we already know that, in the form of the gods, because it was. But I'm thinking it's not that Buddha, if someone is sitting up there and sending like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not like this. It's actually how we see it, how we perceive it, like the way how you perceive me, all of you perceive me very differently. It's how it is actually. So there may be exactly no actual emanation from that point of view. There's someone up there giving some talk, but then these different beings from the hell, from the God, from the human. Of course, what they see, what the gods see, we do not see. What we see, gods do not see, So then they naturally have different experience regarding the same object. It's actually named as emanation of the Buddha, so to speak. So we'll come up to that. So these are the sometimes in the Vajrayana, this term called Tangnang, I like that term, even though I really have no experience, but it's very interesting. Like I've been telling also in the Kamapa's life story, for example, in their mind, they somehow, experience the past bodhisattvas and Buddhas, like Saraha, for example. There are many stories like, Marpa, for example, needed a particular teaching from some great Masida. I think it was Sara or somebody. So therefore, they met in Tangnang, we call it, in the pure view. Sometimes it's in their dream. Sometimes it's not in the dream. Sometimes they are just sitting there, and in this very vision, they actually have those kind of experiences. They have the story they tell. Like Kamapas, the Kamapa, like for example, third Kamapa or 15th Kamapa or something like, they meet with the first Kamapa Tusum Chamber, for example. They needed one very particular, let's say, transmission from the first Kamapa. So then, right there and then they, have that vision. So this is what it's a little bit like that emanation. I'm just saying that emanation, of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, different form. Like last time when Marpa saw Narupa had already passed away. But then Narupa did say, you must come back one more time, because there's something that I really want to, want to give you in terms of teachings. So he went, but when he went, it turned out Narupa had already passed away long ago. But then again in Pulahari somehow they met. But in the Tangnang, that's actually Tangnang, literally. So these things are quite possible, so to speak. Like I was telling the story of the Ujjainpa, how you see these different Masidas. We are blocked by our grasping nature of the mind. We have this time fixation, past, present, future. We have this fixation. We have this fixation of the physical form, very concrete. When these fixations are destroyed, so to speak, everything is possible. Really, that's actually how it happens. When there's a fixation, it's not going to happen. Even when there is this very tiny bit of fixation in oneself, grasping of some kind, it blocks the whole process of the realization. There's a blockage. These are blockage. It's very tiny, but it's still a blockage. Then you do a particular kind of, let's say, so you cut through those wisdoms, right? Anyhow, I'm just thinking that, if we managed to cut through our fixations, then this thing called experiencing the nirmanakaya of the, let's say, the form, pure form of the pure being, it's not so very hard, I'm thinking. But when there's fixation, then yes. But other than that, yeah, it's quite, easy, I'm guessing, for them. uh, that was very general thing about, these things. About the wisdom and kaya, but I'm going to read the lines for you, okay? We have today and tomorrow. We have tomorrow, right? So I'm going to. This ground consciousness, which is the identity of everything, external and internal, is the source of everything that should be eliminated. It has been taught that it will be removed by the Vajra-like Samadhi. Okay. Okay, I'll read this part also. When the ground consciousness arises with obscuration, is negated, all at this time there will be the mirror-like wisdom. All wisdoms appear in it without the concept of mind. It is uncircumscribed, okay, and eternally possessed. Okay, these are okay. Anyway, it realizes all that is to be known, without being indirect, without being directed towards them. It is described as the Dharmakaya because it is the foundation for all wisdom. Here, three things actually. it's a little bit, usually we start from the, from the beginning. And then this is actually the final stage where you become Buddha. So here, but Kamapa talks about this, so I'll also speak this way. What I'm saying is that in a very gradual manner, among the 8 kind of consciousnesses, the consciousness of the sensory consciousness, mental consciousness, 7th consciousness, they are the ones who are transformed, before the transformation of the alaya consciousness. The alaya consciousness, the most subtle layer of the alaya consciousness, is then removed right before one becomes Buddha, correct? So this just giving you an example here. So here, according to the Kamapa Rangjung Dorje, he's speaking from the point of view of a bodhisattva who is on the 10th bodhisattva Bhumi, where he is now about to become an enlightened being as a Buddha. So then in that very moment, the very last, let's say, potential of the wisdom is called Vajra-like wisdom, is what he's saying. It has this ability to uproot these, obscuration of the tendencies, obscuration tendencies, absolutely. In that very moment, then one becomes Buddha actually. Meaning, basically it means Buddhas, the wisdom of the Buddha have no obscuration. Therefore, there's nothing that Buddha do not know. There's nothing that Buddha do not see. So nothing is hidden from the wisdom of the Buddha. To the Bodhisattva, there's still something that's hidden. Okay? But not to the Bodhisattva, not to the Buddha. This is what it meant. In general, here we talk about, okay, another thing I need to maybe tell you is that we're counting these wisdoms, like, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we're going to speak of 4 wisdoms, 5 wisdoms. They are not 4 or 5 different physical wisdoms. They actually are the defining characteristics of the wisdom only. In general, we speak about the 2 wisdoms of the Buddha, actually. We call the, the wisdom of the Buddha of the absolute wisdom, and then the wisdom of the Buddha of the conventional wisdom, actually, so to speak. That's it. So there's 4, 5, sometimes even 6 are really the defining characteristics of the wisdom in short. Because how can there be 5 wisdom? Actually, then there has to be 5 Buddha. Since there is only one mind, so how come there are like 6 wisdoms or 8 wisdoms? Not possible. But they are defining characteristics, like it's defined here. He's saying that from the wisdom point of view, now when the alaya consciousness, like it says here, alaya consciousness on its own, it's really neutral. It's neither positive nor negative. It does not have the sense of grasping at all. So then when it is transformed, then he's saying it's transformed into this wisdom of the Buddha wisdom called mirror-like wisdom. Again, mirror-like wisdom is a metaphor, as you can see it. He describes here the mirror-like wisdom. It's quite easy. The way how mirror reflect us, likewise this wisdom, of the Buddha is actually foundation for the remaining wisdom, or the remaining, all the knowledge, all the wisdom of the Buddha is reflected in that, correct? Reflected in that wisdom. So that's why it becomes the ground. The mirror-like wisdom is the ground, so to speak, and then all of the sameness wisdom, discriminating wisdom, wisdom of activity, dharma dhatu, they actually are, something that's reflected by it, so to speak, is what it meant. And then this, from the Buddha point of view, he says this is Dharmakaya, Chujiku. When in Tibetan we say Chujiku, Chu here meaning phenomena. So it actually means the wisdom that has seen the absolute truth of phenomena as it is, right? So that's why it's called absolute. Generally, there's this, wisdom called the omniscient wisdom of the Buddhas. You have heard that. This omniscient wisdom is, the other wisdom actually. Jinye Chemba, Jitawi Chemba. For instance, when Buddha gave talk to sentient beings like Buddha Shakyamuni did, the potential of the sentient beings, countless sentient beings, never hidden from him. He can read the potential of the Buddha nature mind of every single sentient being, right, without hidden. That power is called omniscient, actually, wisdom, or wisdom of the what we call relative wisdom. And this is why Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they never make a mistake in giving the teachings at all, because they give teaching according to the according to the potential of the beings. And this is why when Buddha gives teaching, the result is direct. Like you hear when Buddha was turning the wheel of the Dharma, the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, as soon as he finished saying his last word, they all became arhat simultaneously, correct? This is what I meant. Likewise, whenever Buddha gave a talk, there were no one who did not show the truth. They see the truth as Buddha speaks it, not like us. There is no repeating at all. Buddha's speech he's spoken only one time. There's no repeating of this, it doesn't exist. So therefore, the result, of the teaching is direct in that very moment, correct? In that very moment. Anyhow, so now we understand what it meant by degeneration, it's meant by that point of view. And then it actually became less and less and less and less. Now, even if you repeat 1,000 times, billion times, we don't even get the idea of that, So it's actually a degeneration point of view. Conceptualize. Too much conceptualization. So yes, the let me check. He is describing the mirror-like wisdom without I want to see a few things in actually general. Buddha nature mind, as of now, has different types of obscurations to it as of now as a sentient being. Therefore, in Buddha Nature Mind book, Uttara Tantra Shastra, he says there are these three types of Buddha Nature Mind. Buddha Nature Mind, in sentient beings, is a state when it's absolutely, absolutely impure. It's absolutely impure. Because our mind has no, realization at all, so it's impure. Then, like bodhisattvas and arhats, they worked on their obscuration and they managed to remove, certain portion of the obscuration. But they have not yet removed all of the obscurations yet. So therefore, their Buddha nature mind could be called pure, but since there are still some stains remaining, so it's not yet absolutely pure, correct? It's like me, when I'm from here, so now let's say I'm on the path of, on the path of merit, okay? And on the path of merit and the path of application, especially on the path of application, I managed to, learn about meditation. I managed to sort of have some very tiny sense of meditation, so to speak. And then this somehow, leads me to the path of seeing, correct? To the path of seeing. In the path of application, there are these 4 different stages. I'm not going to speak every one of that. But then it means, on the path of merit, I learn, I reflect. And then I gain this, I sort of gather the wisdoms of the learning, wisdoms of the reflection, all that. And then they gradually, these wisdoms, they gradually grow and grow and grow and grow. And then eventually, when I'm on the very last stage of the path of application, they become so strong, this wisdom of the learning, reflect, meditation, it induces this very direct realization into the truth. And when it is very directly or nakedly, when you see the truth, what do you think had happened? At that point of time, all of the, conceptualized obscurations that we are not born with is absolutely removed, especially during the meditation part. We call, there are 2 parts, meditation and post-meditation. So during the meditation, this bodhisattva on the first bodhisattva bhumi is same as Buddhahood. There's no difference during the meditation time. They're absolutely free from that. But during the post-meditation, they still experience, an illusion like, let's say, obscurations. And now they develop. So what I'm saying is that the wisdom of the omniscient wisdom of the Buddha actually began there. We started seeing it already was born the first bodhisattva bhumi. Now it's a matter of time for that to complete. So it's completed when we reach the Buddhahood. But then that actually, please don't think that it takes very long. Actually, it's a matter of, like few seconds for them. As far as the bodhisattvas are concerned, if they want, they can go through this 10 bodhisattva bhumi, so-called 10 bodhisattva bhumi, in a split of a second, actually. It's not like they have to work very, very hard and do something else. And no, actually. It's all about getting to that very first bodhisattva bhumi. So now the obscuration point of view. And then the obscuration actually really varies, right now, we have obscuration. The ones that are very, very obvious in us is really the emotions, right? Emotion cling is very obvious. We don't have to tell to anyone. So this, when do you, all of the obscurations, the ideas that we, accumulate after our birth, it's called imputed from the society, from the community, from the religion. You are not born with those ideas. They're all imputed, correct? Those are easily removed when you're on the first bodhisattva bhumi. But then this ego clinging and emotion are still there, not as strong. In the first bodhisattva bhumi, when you realize that emptiness, during the meditation, of course, you do not experience them. But during the post-meditation, still they linger in there in a very subtle manner, but linger there. Now, this becomes this layer, this very subtle, lingering notion of the self, almost non-existent, is still there. So, the path of meditation, correct? During the path of meditation, in meditation, what do you think you are actually doing? This is when they become subtle, meaning they just fade more and fade more and fade more and fade more. And then they just absolutely fade away at the end of the seventh bodhisattva bhumi, just for the sake of understanding, okay? This is when, whether regardless of whether they are in meditation, post-meditation, there is no ego clinging after the eighth bodhisattva bhumi at all. 8, 9, 10 bhumis are called pure because they are pure from experiencing kleshas, absolutely. This is why this wisdom of the sameness, is actually born in that moment. So now one may wonder, okay, what's left, during the post-meditation? Then this most subtle imprints of the obscurations of the, let's say, the emotions, and obscuration actually that obscures you from seeing the truth. That obscuration. But it's not obscuration itself, but it's the imprints, or the most subtle imprints of that is actually removed in the 8th, 9th, and the 10th. This one here, when Kamapa or says Vajra like Samadhi, is when that very last layer of the obscuration, the mental imprints of the ignorance, the most ignorance, is actually removed. I have to mention few things here, so just so that you know. How do you realize emptiness? It's actually mentioned in here, so I'm going to mention those things. On the first bodhisattva bhumi, bhumi was first bodhisattva bhumi, path is the third path of seeing, same thing. The way they gain the realization of emptiness is actually based on the true understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Again, to plant seed, I'm just saying this, okay? What that meant is that Each of the Four Noble Truths, when you analyze, they have four characteristics to them, actually, so to speak. So they become very subtle. Like for us, there's suffering, but we do not see the characteristics of the suffering. We don't see the characteristics of the truth of origination, truth of path, truth of cessation. So here, it's about analytical meditation, so to speak, the wisdom of when we learn, reflect, meditate. In general, when we meditate, there are two things are very important, actually. One we call, in Tibetan is Chepa and Jopa. Chepa meaning analyze. Jopa meaning abide. It can be reversed too, So Chepa, how do you enter meditation? Like, for example, you meditate on impermanence. How do you do that? First, you try to understand what does it mean by impermanent, called analyzing. Then you arrive to this understanding, a very good understanding of impermanence. That's it. Then you hold that view. That's how you call it meditation. So you can see, you observe, you analyze, you arrive to an understanding. This is your highest understanding. And then you stay there. Like, for example, compassion. How do you meditate on compassion? Exactly same. First, you analyze the suffering of sentient beings, or you observe the suffering of sentient beings. By observing the suffering of sentient beings, it induces the compassion in you. Once when the compassion is induced, you do not need to analyze again. That's what you hold on. Every meditation has that aspect of abiding, of analyzing. Mainly, we try to abide as much as we can. We try to really stay and hold that view. I like to think it's more like holding that view. Like, for example, I really like this idea of holding or living, perhaps is a better word. I try to live as much as I can with this understanding of the impermanent, because it always helps me. Perhaps that was. It's not like you close your eyes, you sit all by yourself in a room, and then you do this. No, not that sense. You can do that, and also you can do that. But who says you cannot use the same thing when you are in a train or when you are in an airplane or wherever you are? Your mind is with you. It's not that you packed out your mind somewhere and then you can't do that. There is no restriction saying that, you can do it only in a gompa, or when there is some very ritual happening, and then, yes, this meditation time. Actually, no, not at all. So, here, anyway, coming back to this, so here, Four Noble Truths. They analyze what is the truth of suffering, what is the truth of origination, path, analyze, they understand the characteristics. They arrive this understanding. They arrive to this insight. Okay? To that insight. And then they try to keep that insight. That's actually a good word. You keep that insight. When you keep that insight, again you analyze that insight. To bring growth to your that, you analyze your insight. This is how they grow. The more and more I analyze, the growth will come in there. So likewise here also, this is why in the first Bodhisattva Bhumi, we traditionally talk about 16 instances of the wisdom. You don't count it, but actually the 15th instances wisdom is the part of the wisdom on first Bodhisattva Bhumi. I don't know how you understand, but I'm just saying it. Again, I'm planting the seed. 16th one is the path of meditation. So again, don't worry about these things, numbers, but for me at least, it's important to say these things, so that I get the satisfaction that I'm giving you something. Actually, something that Shamarumchi told me a long time ago. The first time when I went to abroad, I guess. I went abroad. He told me that actually. Because when I came back, it was my first trip to Europe. And then it was in Kibi. He always lived here. So he sent me, actually sent me forcefully, but I'm not going to tell the whole story. It's a very long story. He really, really forcefully, he just almost pushed me. So I went back. I was scared to death because first of all, I did not teach in Dharma. Second of all, in English. I do not speak normal English like common English. And he sent me. Anyway, so I went. I mean, not because I was brave, but he sent me. So anyway, when I came back, then he asked me many questions. He wanted to know how it went. And so then he said, oh, well, he asked me things like, did people ask you to give refuge and things like this? I said, yes. He said, did you give? I said, no. He scolded me to death. And then he asked me, did they ask you about other things? I said, did you answer? I said, no. He said, no. You must know, right now, when you go around, you're planting the seed. It's not that you make them realized beings. You're not. You're just planting the seed. From now on, then he gave me some instructions. So then, of course, now I know, I also know myself that it's very important to plant the seed. So anyhow, it came from there, from Rinpoche. And then, of course, all the other teachers, I don't have too many other teachers, but some teachers that I, met and also read in the book that I found, actually from my own experience point of view, whatever I may be saying today, whatever I'm remembering is because, of the pakcha I have, Otherwise, how would I be able to do that? The pakcha meaning the seed, these, tendencies. In Tibetan, we call it pakcha, it's a good word. So here, let's say the seed. Oh, you still have sojong, right? So, okay. Okey-doke. Right, I think I'll stop here, so we'll finish tomorrow then. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Khenpo, for your teachings. We will surely miss you. Einstein is also one of my favorite scientists. And I remember hearing a quote that he said that mind or consciousness is like energy. It cannot be created nor destroyed. And from my little understanding of the teachings, if we truly practice absolute compassion, which is like we dedicate our merit every moment to others to free the suffering of all sentient beings. If we practice absolute compassion, which is said to be inseparable from emptiness of the ultimate reality, and because the fruition of our karma or actions become caught with us, as you explained yesterday with our klesha, I think like our karma like catch up on us like very, very soon or faster than we hope for. Sometimes. Is that kind of an experience of samadhi, or does that depend on the level of our kaya? Like for some are experiencing nirmanakaya, sambhogakaya, dharmanakaya. But I think what I'm trying to say is, can even just for a moment, can we really experience emptiness through practice of momentary absolute compassion? Because if they said that if Buddhahood can be reached in a lifetime, then is it possible to experience the glimpse or feeling of a non-duality state, but through like a joyful, non-attached mind? And if so, last question, are there living Buddhas with us now, or like in living Bodhisattvas living with us in this lifetime? Thank you.
Yes, I really believe that it's possible. It's actually emptiness exists. Emptiness is present, it's omnipresent. So therefore, the nature of the mind is omnipresent. We do not need to do anything about that. So the glimpses of them are happening every moment, every second. So if we have some meditation experience, one definitely can experience that. There is no doubt about that at all. we do say that glimpses are always there. Shantideva says that, everybody says that. So of course, it's our own nature of the mind, just like the way how we experience klesha. Likewise, let's say, the glimpses, the experience of non-duality, wisdom is always there. But it's not always that we are aware of that, actually. It's not always that we notice that. We just, all the time, it goes unnoticed. It's happening because it's there along with everything. So it's there, right there, like this. So then it's happening, but it goes unnoticed because of the power of kleshas. Kleshas are too powerful, it overpowers that. And then therefore, even though it's happening, everything's happening right there, we do not really recognize that. But then sometimes when there is this, let's say, a very good, perhaps mental purification of instantaneous mental purification, then in that very moment, the glimpses can be a little bit prolonged, so to speak. So some people with good meditation experience is a prolonged, let's say, experiences of the arising of that mind, right? It's a bit prolonged. So most of the people, we miss it, actually. Unfortunately, we miss it. So there is no question of prolonging them. So yes. And then as far as the bodhisattvas, Buddhas, I'm very sure there are many of them, in and around us, because that's very much the, nature of bodhicitta, that once when you accomplish, especially the relative bodhicitta, then it's inevitable for them to be present in the universe, because that is very much the, what it meant by being bodhicitta. But not as in a very physical manner, but in a manner of, in the manner of, let's say, manifestation. It's not that they, sort of physically is somewhere, but in a manner of manifestation, meaning like they manifest when the mind of the sentient beings are ready to experience that. Then there is a manifestation of that. But then when the minds of the sentient beings are not yet ready, then there aren't any manifestation. So that means the cause and condition come together. Our karma, actually we call it our wishes, and then the Buddha's own, when these things comes together. So there is that cause, condition, and time. These three things must come together. When they come together, then that happens automatically, so to speak. So yes, I very much believe that they are present. But it also, the world is not because of the bodhisattvas, but it's because of our own doing. So therefore, even if the bodhisattvas or the Buddhas, even if they are present somewhere, it's not. It does not mean they lack any kind of compassion or anything. It's just because we lack the merit, to receive the teaching. We lack, to experience, let's say, to experience them, basically, right? To experience them.
Thank you, Rinpoche Khenpo. My question is, bodhicitta and emptiness, what is more important for our practice and why?
Okay. So, all right, now two things. Traditionally, we talk about relative bodhicitta and absolute bodhicitta. Like I was saying a little bit earlier that, without the other actually cannot manifest. What I'm saying that without the insight, without the knowledge and the wisdom, to experience the relative bodhicitta is actually really not possible, actually. So therefore they are equally important in this regard. They are equally important. The other thing about that is we can differentiate in the sense like relative bodhicitta is the ground of benefiting others. Like therefore the Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, whatever these forms, they are there because of the accomplishment of the relative bodhicitta. The Dharmakaya is an absolute bodhicitta, that's for your own benefit. So just in a very traditional sense, so that we can understand is what it meant. We sometimes say that, the arhats do not lack the ultimate bodhicitta, but they lack the, relative bodhicitta, so to speak. So if it's a very good question, actually, so to speak, if I want to have self-liberation, most probably there is no need to focus on relative bodhicitta as much, since I'm not really concerned so much about other sentient beings, let's say liberation, but rather I'm really concerned with my own liberation. So for that, the realization of the emptiness self is more than enough. So this is why you do that. But then, if I am not so very concerned about my own liberation, if I'm concerned about the liberation of the others, then actually I need to focus on both. And especially I need to focus on, because in order to liberate others, I must be liberated first of all. Without oneself being liberated, I cannot liberate others. And then on top of that, then I need the source to benefit them. And that is actually relative bodhicitta. So without the relative bodhicitta is pretty much accomplished by the perfections, generosity, all of that. So I'm just giving you some, some very, let's say, common answer to that. Both are, for me, both are equally important. Really, you can't say, one is important than the other. But so I brought it up because of that. Really, it depends what is it that you want. It really comes to that, actually. So if I want self-liberation, then I do not really need to focus so much on relative bodhicitta, because the ultimate bodhicitta is more than enough. But if I am focusing on the benefit of the others, then yes, I must focus on relative bodhicitta as well as on ultimate bodhicitta, right? So.
Did I understand it right that for realization of emptiness, you have to have this vajra-like samadhi? And if yes, how can we reach that if we have daily life with also work and so?
It's a very good question, actually. So yes, please don't get excited by vajra like samadhi. It doesn't. Okay, what it meant is we have to really achieve it step by step. So there are steps. It's a very good question. The step, we are talking about something on an ultimate level, but you need to get there. No, it's like going to the top floor. Without going floor by floor, you can't just get to the top floor. So when you say vajra like samadhi, things like this, you're talking about the most top floor. So here, the seed for that is learning, reflecting, meditation. The three wisdoms. Wisdom that we gain by learning is very much the first step. Without that, there is no foundation at all. And that becomes the foundation for reflecting, correct? So if you have nothing to reflect in terms of knowledge, then of course you have nothing to reflect. So now, then you reflect. Once when you reflect, then the improvement, the growth comes about. The growth of whatever you have learned, the realization, the insight comes about. And then at the same time, while reflecting, that actually induces or it leads you, to the meditation, the third, let's say, wisdom. Here, the wisdom, again, we have to divide that actually. This wisdom, the meditation, wisdom meditation. It does not mean meditate here. It actually is, an insight that you gained regarding the truth through the help of the former two wisdom, uh, wisdom of learning, wisdom of reflecting, then you gain an insight, a very good understanding. And this understanding is not just an understanding. There's a sense of, an experience. It's more than intellectual, actually. There's a sense of, realization, let's say, sense of realization to that. It's not yet very direct, yet it is very, very valid. It's very, very valid. So with these wisdoms, when they synchronize, and then when we get to the high, like from the path of application is where meditation is born, path of application. Within the path of application, the characteristics of the wisdom of learning, reflecting, meditating actually, grows. And then this very direct realization you gain, that is named as first path of seeing. It actually means, all of that experience that I have early on, which was a bit of an inferential, right? It was an inferential actually, valid inferential. And now it's direct. It's no longer inferential. You see it very organically, very nakedly, very directly. And this wisdom is called the wisdom of emptiness, actually. And this wisdom of the emptiness is same on all of the bodhisattva bhumis. And this wisdom of the emptiness is what is, let's say, manifested further and further and further. There is no new wisdom you gain. You already gained the wisdom. And in the remaining path is called path of meditation, right? The path of meditation. There you do not meditate. It meant whatever you have, it's called familiarizing. I am very much familiarizing or deepening, furthering the realization that I have already gained, the direct realization that I already gained into the absolute. I'm just, furthering that. This is meditation, actually. So then, that's really how it is. So then this Vajra is it means there are this, a crucial point, actually. Like the path of application, the very last moment of the path of the application is called Vajra-like meditation. This Vajra-like meditation then brings forth the very first moment of the wisdom on the path of seeing. And then now let's say the very last moment of the path of seeing is called Vajra-like, because it then brings forth the very first moment of the second bodhisattva bhumi. So like this, there are so many Vajra-like samadhi. On each 10 bhumi, there are 10 Vajra-like samadhi. It basically meaning the very last moment of that meditation experience that brings forth the later and later and higher realization. That's what it meant by Vajra-like samadhi.
Maybe one more little question came just up. Maybe, let's say you have a more arhat karma, and to rescue all beings to you is somewhat artificial. But there's one being you really want to save. Is it enough for this Buddhist sattva motivation then?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry, one arhat?
Yeah. I mean, if this idea to save all sentient beings somehow seems somewhat artificial.
Okay.
But maybe you have a brother or sister and you really want to save this person as well. Is it enough for the Bodhisattva motivation? Or is it
No, it's
too
not.
small?
It's not. It's not. Here literally means all sentient beings.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you.
Hello, Khenpo. I don't understand how, like, inherent in us, Buddha nature can, like, appear, or this nature can produce dualism, let's say, in short. And this alaya, that means is not conscious about itself. It doesn't see itself, and this is like kind of is freedom also in this, that we wants to experience itself on uncountless ways. I mean, because hard to talk about not dualism in dualistic language, then also for me to express, I don't understand where is this starts, because you explain all of this from the, like, we already experienced some situation and we going like to the cause of all of this suffer, all of this what's happened. Even is Buddha nature in us, right? Like inherent. Then yeah, I'm asking about like beginning. Seems like maybe wrong question in this. I'm in this situation anywhere in the process, right? Then maybe it's a little bit a question about how this I concept, like wrong concept of me appeared, like
Okay.
dualism.
All right. Okay. If I understood you correctly, then let's say first we have to separate the Buddha nature mind from the alaya consciousness. Okay. In a simple way, Buddha nature mind is the true nature of the mind. Let's put it this way. And then that true nature mind is really hidden. It's obscured, and it is obscured by all of these consciousnesses. For example, the eight consciousness, seven consciousness, they are the obscuration. They're like the clouds. All of them. So therefore, it's as far as the true nature of the mind is concerned, the Buddha nature mind is concerned, it always remains without any stain. Okay? It does never have any notion of dualistic at all. So therefore, these two very different things. The alaya consciousness, all of the eight consciousnesses, they are all something that we must eventually get rid of, because they are the reason for dualistic clingings. Any kind of notion we have of samsara, nirvana, anything is done by all of them together somehow. It's not one or it's not two, but all of them together, they bring out this notion of dualistic clinging. So this is why they are called obscuration, because dipa. So then, yes. So now let's say, with the help of learning, reflecting, meditating, what really is happening is that these, are conditions. They help our own this innately existing Buddhahood, Buddha nature, awakened state within us. They're not outside of us. So when they condition it, then our this innately abiding wisdom, this is when they start, let's say, growing, let's put it this way, And then if they grow, then they very naturally also remove, obscurations. Obscuration that are very, very easy, they're removed easily. But then there are some obscuration, they take a bit longer. We call subtle, bit longer. What I'm saying is that please understand that this realization is born from within. It's not because of the learning reflecting only. The learning reflecting is the reason, is the condition. It conditioned for you to have your inner realization. So therefore, someone else cannot give you that realization. Okay? If I did not have the Buddha nature mind within me, no matter how long I study, no matter how much I reflect, learn, no realization can come out of that. Because this learning, reflecting, meditation, they do not create the Buddha nature mind. They do not create the nature of the mind. It's in there, so they are conditioned. Everything like teachings, Buddha himself, Buddha's teaching, Sangha, right? They're all conditioned for us to experience our own that inner, truly existing Buddha nature mind or true nature of the mind, like in the Julama. So therefore, also in this book, he says that this is why it's called alaya consciousness, to separate alaya consciousness from Buddha nature mind. They have very similar function. Alaya consciousness is ground, and then the Buddha nature mind is also ground. So to not mistake them, they say alaya consciousness. And alaya consciousness is ground for samsara. It actually is synonymous with the samsara. It is the samsara. It's not like there's alaya consciousness and samsara is based on that. It's very much the manifestation of that, correct? Like ocean and wave, like we said earlier. So the grasping and all that are the function of, in short, is the function of our own mind. And our mind is 100% deluded. Also in Julama, like I mentioned that before, he talks about suchness, the deluded suchness, the undiluted suchness. Right now, our Buddha nature mind within us is deluded. It's simply meaning that it's there, but at the same time, there are these delusions, there, so to speak. So we just remove that, it's like that. So yes, if I understood correctly, then if you thought, Buddha nature mind kind of experience dualism, they don't actually at all.
Then alaya is produced by Buddha nature is, let's say, bigger than alaya. It's like is as an option. I mean, because from this point of view, there is not good and bad. We just make it this label, let's say, and this is kind of proof of freedom of appearance, or like how to understand this. Because now to explain non-dualism is like still again something white and black, like alaya as a cause of samsara and Buddha nature. Again, we separate some two things here. What's the cause of what produce alaya? Let's say like this.
Yeah, alaya and ignorance are synonymous.
And how ignorance appears in not obscured Buddha nature mind.
No. Buddha nature mind, okay, the ignorance and alaya consciousness, are actually synonymous. So it's because of the, let's say, they are nature of perceiving things mistakenly, correct? Their function is they perceive things in a very mistaken way. So that's why everything we see because of the Buddha nature mind is mistaken. It's the way how it is, right? That's why they are called obscuration, because whatever they see, whatever they perceive is actually a very mistaken way. They see the truth in a very mistaken way. That's misconception.
Possibility to see directly, but we don't know how, in a way, like
so
see directly.
directly in the sense like we can always, the alaya consciousness and the ignorance, are something that we can very easily actually get rid of. We can very easily get rid of, right? So,
Investigate, meditate. Thank you so much.
okay. Nam dia tham che zi pa nye to na ye nye pe dan bom che che ga ye na che ba la ye tu pa ye se ban zo le do wa ri shu ge wan di ye ki wo ye kun se nam yi che zo zo se nam ye che le chung wa tam ba ye kun ye to ba ri shu Minjaro lombo kuya tashi cho yanlaya tujo sunge tashi Tadalaya teme tuje tashi cho gyalve kusum tuji tashi cho.
And of course, at 11:30 to join the lunch session.